She said, Canada Talks. Welcome back. I'm Christine Bentley in studio with Sharon Caddy and the Toronto Star's Peter Edwards, an expert on organized crime, who is going to release a new book on the Vito Rizzuto Mafia War. Tell us the basic story about that.
It's pretty, I'm looking for human stories, and this is a guy who is in prison. While he's in prison, his eldest son is murdered and his father's murdered. And he's a guy who's a control freak, but now he can't control his own family safety. And his father shot to death in front of his mother. And so it's about what does he do when he gets out of prison, and looking at about a 5-year span.
And what did he do?
A lot of people kind of went into caskets.
Oh dear. Lovely.
Yeah, and it was pretty predictable who'd be killed, and you'd actually have a list of, I mean, it's kind of awful, but you'd be collecting pictures of people who you think are likely targets, and they'd know their targets.
Wow. So how prevalent is the mafia in Canada?
Pretty big deal. I mean, not number-wise if you're looking at how many people, but if you're looking at influence and money and sort of in a global thing, they're a big deal. With Canada, we don't have anti-mafia laws, and so you can flee Italy, come here, and you can't be extradited for mafia association. Like a lot of people, the Italian authorities are pretty upset with Canada a lot of the time because people hide out here and we just won't ship them back.
And how different is the mafia today from the mafia going back 20, 30 years?
Very, very corporate, very, very global. Mm-hmm. I mean, if there's a problem, a lot of them are doing things offshore. A lot of them are thinking, how do we make money from web servers? They trying to stay away from grubbier things when they can.
It sounds like the internet has also affected the mafia then. I mean, that's connected worldwide more than ever before.
Oh, and online gambling is just great for them.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Oh, yeah. Online gambling is just, I mean, it's as good as it gets for them, because you just have to have a couple guys who have in town who create fear so that people will pay their debts, and then you do it all offshore.
Wow. Now, you were saying that there are people living in Woodbridge, Ontario, who are wanted and have been wanted in Italy for like 40 years, and they're running the show in Italy from Woodbridge.
Yeah, it was odd. Once someone leaked me a list of a dozen mafia fugitives from Italy in the Woodbridge area, and the thing that shocked me was they didn't change their names. I mean, you'd knock on the door and say the name, and the guy would say, yeah, and you'd say, I understand you're wanted. And he'd say, no, it's not me, and he'd say, yeah, I think it is, but they wouldn't be hiding, and they wouldn't have like dyed their hair and change their fingerprints. They'd be just looking exactly the same.
That's confidence.
Oh
really? My goodness.
Well, and they just can't be extradited. Like you can't extradite someone for a law that doesn't exist in Canada, and we don't have a mafia association law.
So have we unwittingly become some sort of a world refuge for the mafia?
We're almost like the place to go when for a timeout. Like when you want a little break. Or you want to plan things, or like Canada is very, very important. And when they talk about North America, they're talking about Canada. Like when they pick them up on wiretaps talking about North America, they really mean Canada, and by Canada they generally mean York region.
Wow. So tell us about going back to bikers again. You say that there's a big difference in generationally, that the younger ones have a different sort of complexion than the older ones.
The old guys really, really know their bikes, like really know them, and if you're talking to them and someone rides by and he's kind of abusing a Harley, they just groan. Like, it really hurts them. And
so it's genuinely about the bikes for the older guys.
It's more of a brotherhood. It really was the clubhouse and the more than the crime.
Yeah, the crime, it was sort of like crime if necessary, but not necessarily crime. But the bikes were really central. I know one guy who's really respected who's had the same bike since the 70s, and he went to prison, came back, put the bike back on the road, and everybody thought, wow, because it was a rebuilt bike to begin with.
What about the young bikers now, though? You say they're pretty ruthless.
It's a different thing. Like it's not as respectful. It's almost like a lot of businesses or a lot of societies or organizations, it's not... very, very different, and it's not really about the bikes.
The philosophy's completely upended.
Yeah, and in a way it's sort of understandable. Like, not many 35-year-olds want to be bossed around by 65-year-olds.
Too bad.
Yeah.
Oh, they're not getting any respect. Oh, dear.
So
do they get whacked?
Not really, no. It's just sort of who kicks who out of the club and who gets
Yeah.
mad and who moves somewhere else and who doesn't invite someone and who unfriends someone on Facebook or something. Like, it's not, there, you know, when you look at it, there's not that many lying in ditches in Ontario.
No.
And you had a great saying for that, because they've come to the conclusion that you can only kill somebody once.
Yeah.
So you may as well work it out. I love that. I love that expression.
Well, now we were talking a bit about now the generational differences and stuff, but for the general public, what are the misconceptions when it comes to bikers?
One is that all the women are dragged in and hated. Some
Mm-hmm.
of the women love it. I mean, it's an odd thing writing about it that you have women contacting you, asking you to set them up with bikers, and you say, no, it's not really my job.
They do that?
Yeah, I've had
They
school,
write you and ask you to set them up with bikers?
yeah, I've had school teachers do that.
Really?
So it's not.
This is like the prison thing. People who fall in love with, convicts that have a life sentence.
So they're not like these captive dumb women who are,
No.
just pleading to get out. It's, to be honest, there's a lot of board school teachers who are asking to get set up with them.
Well, what is it about the biker thing that's attractive? What's the panache? What is the grabber?
It's odd because the ones in prison, I think there's something about having a bad boy who's controllable.
Oh, that's bad.
Who you can
Yeah.
walk away from at any time. Like when Campbell was in prison, he was getting all
Mhm.
sorts of letters and pictures sent to him. And there's like a website where you go on, pick who you want to write to, or maybe you batch them.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, that's not really that surprising. And the wives know it, and it's whatever. That's just part of the deal.
This is what she said on Canada Talks 167 on Sirius XM with me, Christine Bentley, and Sharon Caddy in studio with Peter Edwards from the Toronto Star, an expert in organized crime. And Peter, you are saying that sometimes the women start some of these violent
Altercations? Yes.
Shall we put it that way? That's a nice way, Sharon.
That's a nice, genteel word.
It's almost like in any group, if you have someone hooking up with someone else's spouse, you're going to have tensions.
Except it's magnified there.
Well, except you've got people who maybe don't have as much impulse control as other people. Or,
It's just not tolerated. Bottom line. Yeah.
well, you get things where it easily could escalate. Like if people have to be around their ex and someone else. And it's a small club. That's going to be a problem. Like it's generally frowned upon to go after someone's ex or spouse.
Well, I think in real life it's kind of somebody's ex. Even exes are off limits.
Well, it's just people aren't comfortable with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, things happen, but I mean that happens with police. That even I've heard happens in journalism. So.
So tell us about the etiquette of the pecking order for men and for women, for men and their wives. There's a whole pecking order thing, which we know about a little bit in the mafia, but we don't know so much about in biker gangs.
You can tell with wives who's a wife and who isn't. Like you can tell who's there for the party and who's there for the long haul. If there's some get together, you can really quickly tell. And if someone isn't new to that and they're single, there's certain people you just absolutely do not hit on. Like unless you want to speed up your suicide, like you just don't do that. And someone might look available, but they're not.
Have you ever been in a situation where you thought, "Ooh, I just might have just crossed the line here. It could be today."
I had one guy really mad at me. It wasn't a Hell's Angel, but in a different club, and he just dumbly made an assumption that wasn't true, and just kind of used a lot of drugs, and so he just kept building and building, like sort of paranoia upon paranoia. If you don't know who you're talking to, it's better not to joke, and it's better to keep things really pure and simple.
But when you get into a situation like that, like for someone like you, what do you do? I mean, how do you either smooth things over or skirt around? Like, what do you do?
Generally, if you don't escalate things, it's good to talk to people, and generally just don't escalate it. Like, don't argue. And sometimes you inherit someone's enemies. Like, if you get along with someone, it's almost like grade 8, then you inherit the people who don't like them. And so if you're getting along with someone, then it means everyone that person doesn't get along with has got a problem with you as well.
Oh boy. Let me ask you something. Do the police ever come to you and ask you for help? I would imagine, or are they too...
See, I mean, I'm happy to talk to anybody, but I'm not working for anybody, and I don't want to be in anybody's pocket. And if anybody screws up, I want to write about them. So I've written about police doing bad things, and I've written about bikers doing bad things. And
So, I mean, but if a police officer called you and said, I really need some help, I'm working on this case, on this person, what can you tell me? What, do you stay away?
It's not my job to do their job.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I'm not suggesting it is, I'm just asking whether
Yeah.
they approach you because you are an expert and you're not turned over every 3 years.
I try to stay out of that situation because I just don't want to be. I don't want to be in anybody's camp. Like I really.
Well, yeah, you would lose the trust of the people you're writing about and with.
Yeah, and if they want to put someone in jail, that's their job. Like my job is something I think that's different. And I think if you get pulled into that, then people lose respect for you, and you end up in the end getting less information.
And I would think that's the key right there. The word, whether we're looking at the bikers, whether we're looking at the mafia, respect is the key.
Yeah, and I try to have it where don't tell me something if you don't want it in print.
Yeah.
That I'm a reporter and I'm going to be a reporter. If you invite me to a party, I'll be a reporter at the party. So
But you have that understanding. It's up front. Like there's no hidden agendas there. They know.
Yeah.
They know who you are, where you're at, and you know where they're at, and it's a respect.
One of the biggest things you have to watch for, I think, with anybody is they don't want to be tricked. If you're trying to figure out how to offend somebody besides hitting on their wife, tricking them is about the worst thing you can do.
Well, because it's dishonest.
Yeah.
If you're upfront, they can make a decision, yes or no, I'll talk to you, yes or no, I'll give you this information.
And it's pretty insulting too, because you betray a trust, and
Exactly.
So tricking someone, it's better to be really, really upfront,
Mm-hmm.
and to be just not pretending to know what you don't know.
Right.
Like a lot of them can really sniff it out. If you try to pretend you're an expert on something, they'll know. So it's better just to say I don't know or who knows or whatever. If you don't really, really know something, don't say it.
You've written 11 books. Now, do you ever have anybody approach you quietly and say, why don't you do a book on me?
Yeah, I've actually got one guy I'm talking to now who's he's had a whole bunch of trouble with police. Now he has a whole bunch of trouble with the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. He's living sort of in the woods somewhere, and
Is he a biker?
He's been in the big bike clubs, and now
Okay.
he's kind of an independent sort of guy who knows a lot of bikers.
And when there's something, an opportunity, let's call it, like this arises, from your end, what do you have to do? You have to sort of assess and determine whether there's an agenda at play here, or whether it's just a genuine, I've got a story.
And it's got to be, can you control